To be a greater community of people vocal that's beginning to not be intimidated by religion. Religion is the biggest intimidator we have. You know that, don't you? I mean, it does. It tries to put us in a place, and the improper information we've been given from religion puts us many times in a place where if we see something that's beyond what we've been taught, it puts us in a place to have to defend it against this marvelous book, which is a great error, because this book is a compilation of many books in which as many as there are in here are as equal in value, and were left out here. And that is many, and there are many of them that many people do know, like the Book of Enoch. Why would they leave the Book of Enoch out? And one of the reasons they left it out is there's no way to read the Book of Enoch and make it literal. It's just it's a metaphysical book. I mean, it deals with spiritual concepts and ideas, and it's not any way because of the language. It's like the Book of Revelation. You know, the Book of Revelation was left out until somewhere around the 6th or 7th century. Then it was put in. It was left out. Why? Because it was hard for them to distort it by corruption, would be changing the wording of it, to change the wording. It was hard for them to change the wording of it, so they had to add a lot to it. There's quite a bit added to the Book of Revelation. The first chapter has 9 added verses that was added by the church to change the story, because the Book of Revelation is the unveiling of the 7 seals. That's the proper name for it, the unveiling of the 7 seals. Those 7 seals that are to be unveiled are the endocrine glands in the physical body, are known in Eastern terminology as the chakras. But see, if people knew that and could cross those dots, then they could respect many of the Hindu scripts and Vedic scripts that predate anything we have, and Buddhist and Zoroaster that predate anything we have in the Hebrew Bible. And, you know, their philosophy is much older than what we have. But what have we all been taught to believe? That outside this book, everything else is a lie. Yeah. When actually it takes the information in many of those other books to make this book tell the story that's comprehensible. The Genesis story is not comprehensible, period. There's nobody. A child could not grasp that story. He would have too many questions. He said, "You mean a snake can talk?" And then you would have to convince him somehow or other, because his mind logically thinks that a snake don't talk. You know. Now dogs try to talk. Don't your pets? Many people have pets, their dogs talk to them. But a snake don't talk, even if it's your pet snake. It don't talk. Snake said, we're not intended to talk.
Well, that's
in a
the
way.
thing about religion, is there's more questions than there are answers.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly. And that.
Themselves.
Yeah.
Their intimidation and fear, but inside that same Bible, it tells us, know ye not that you were never given the spirit of fear, but of a strong heart and a sound mind?
Right.
But they want to intimidate you and teach you by fear, make you live in fear,
Right.
so you can go to their holy place or their unholy place. But their own book says, you were not given the spirit of fear.
Right. So, but it's fear that makes us think that this is the only book that has value to it. Not only that, then they take this book and try to make it history and literal. And that adds confusion to confusion.
But only the parts that make sense, Lynn, because you remember Dave told us how many times.
I argued that today.
Only take what can be literal that can be, and the rest of it, well, you got to just take it in faith.
I mean, yeah, you got to take
You'll
it in
find
faith.
out when you get to heaven.
And that's what they told me.
That's what they were telling you.
That's what they told me. Tell fool, you ask too many questions, you'll find out when you get there. That was exactly and I'm talking about a man who, the Bible is revered. In some denominations, it is the only Bible that you should use. If it's the Church of God, some of them say, if you don't use the Dake Bible and the Dake Notes, because he was that revered. I mean, he was phenomenal. And he did a lot of research, but it was all stuck with the idea that it's a literal historical book. And you get beyond that and you look and you begin to see it is, I would agree, it's probably the most phenomenal book that's in the world, but you have to have other material to stand beside it to understand what it's saying, because when you go to the book of Genesis to be the foundation of everything that is, and you don't understand the tree, and then they're trying to tell you it's an apple tree, then they try to convince you this tree of life, and you hadn't got a clue what that is, and then they tell you that was Jesus, was the tree of life. And then they convince you that there's an apple tree there, that somebody ate the apple tree, and that caused corruption to fall on everybody, and then God really got upset and had to curse everything on the earth. All of those are ideas that's built off of the interpretation that we have. And those ideas are confusing to the mind of a child. So we start a child out confusing them, telling them just believe this, just trust this, or have faith is what we say. When the story is not accurate told that way. But when it's told accurately, everybody I've ever talked to, if they would just give me some time and I tell them, I said, here's what it really is saying if you look at from the original language, or you put it together with other information, here's what it's really saying. And you know what people always say? Well, you know, that makes sense. Like it's not supposed to. Like when you read it here of this talking snake, that don't make no sense. I mean, that should be a clue. Here's your sign. That don't make sense. You know why? It's not sensual. And that's one of the reasons
Lynn, how could all those people that Cain was afraid of come from just Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel?
Well, you know, there you go. When you got
He was
Adam and
afraid
these
of the
kids,
sheep.
where did they go get their wives?
Yeah,
And
that's what I
that's a
always
real
wondered.
good question. Where did Adam and Eve's kids go get their wives? And you know how Dake answered that? I asked that question. I asked that question 40-something years ago. I asked Dake that very question. And you know what he said?
No.
He said, because Adam and Eve had daughters first. And I said, oh, so we started out with incest. The brothers married their sisters. And you know, that's exactly what he said. That's exactly what happened.
But even
That's why God got mad to the whole thing. It was so incestual. I said, well, if it was that incestual, whose idea was behind that? Wasn't that God's creation?
But even if that was true, Lynn, where did the multitudes of people that Cain was afraid of come from?
Well,
Then you
obviously,
couldn't read that.
obviously today we're living in a time where the kids are not taking this idea any longer. They're questioning it, and that's a good thing. So we have the millennials that are shaking the world up. And I heard a comment on the National Public Radio about some young girls. She's 18, 20. She actually, her and her sister got on TED Talk. They started a new movement, and that movement was in Indonesia, that they would be completely plastic free from plastic bags, plastic straws, and all the other plastics that's contaminating the oceans and everything else. And they actually started a movement, and so that movement becomes so powerful that the state of Indonesia has declared 2018, this past year, that they have declared that they are going to be plastic free, made it a law. So this is the way these new people are talking, and they said that their new religion is plasticology. Isn't that phenomenal? And these girls were on TED Talk, so hallelujah, there you go. So let me read you some notes of things that I had written this morning, and we'll jump in here. Jesus said this in John, "Take up your cross and follow me." Now that has really been grossly misunderstood, and yet when we begin to look at it and we begin to understand that, we realize that I am the product of the energy that we call God, period. As God is, I am. That's just the way it is. So, you know, when I say, well, are you God? I am God, but not in the sense that you think of God as the all in all. I am a drop of that. I am a speck of that with the potential of all of that. Now there are key words there. Potential, what does that mean? That means that there is more in me than I'm actually drawing out of me. That's true with every one of us. And many times what we're drawing out of us is a low base thing when we can draw from a very high spiritual thing. And that's our choice. That's not a bad choice. That's just a choice. So when people make choices that disagree with our ideologies that we have been taught by religion, then what do? We condemn them, we say they're going to hell or they're of the devil or whatever. Why? Because it's not the choice that I made. It was a choice they made. So we're living in a time where people are beginning to make choices, and those choices aren't bad, but I think they're their choices. So here's my notes. So we live in a world that is regulated by a timeless principle. And I'm choosing certain words. We live in a world that is regulated by timeless principles. And when we look at time, and most of our whole life is built on this idea we have of time, that now the quantum science are saying that our idea of time is an illusion. So when I say that I am X amount of years old, I'm saying that based off a scale that quantum science is saying now is an illusionary scale. Why would that be? Because my idea of time is relegated to the earth realm. And in the earth realm, the earth rotates on a axis where it turns. It takes it 24 hours or so to make one complete revolution. And in that, I call that a day. And from that, I measure 7 of them and call that a week. And from that, I measure 52 of them and call that a year and call that time. Well, is that how Mars operates? And of course, no. They know, no, there's nothing like that at all in Mars. Is that how the sun operates? No, it doesn't operate. Well, how does the galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy, how does it move? Does it move on that scale? Not at all. It's got what it calls the great year. So in astrology and in mythology, our Milky Way galaxy takes 25,000, almost 26,000, 25,920 years to make one complete revolution, and it calls that a day or a year. So when you start measuring this thing we call time, by that, obviously our scale don't fit. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we have a confusion of what is time. So I use this thing called timelessness because the entire universe is set on principles that are timeless. In other words, these principles are laws that you cannot regulate to time. And I want you to grasp this because when Jesus says take up your cross, he's talking about taking up your astrological brand or your astrological enneagram, because every one of us was branded at birth, at inception, or conception, when we were conceived, or when we were incarnated. All of those different words are terminologies. We need to think deeper into them. We don't need to communicate ourselves from them because we've been raised in America, where it's this Western idea of Christianity dominates the mindset of most all people. Whether they know it or don't know it, it still dominates their thinking. And we have to try to deliver ourselves from that, because every one of us are incarnate in this time. And we will reincarnate in another time. And in that, we come to a greater understanding that death is an illusion. It's not true as to how we see it. Like, for instance, when someone, we say, gets old and dies. Well, they grow older according to our measurement of time, so to speak. And they lay this suit down we call a body, which this body of book we call the Scripture tells us that they take off this suit. Why? To pick up another. To put on another. So in that, there is no death. Okay, and so we just constantly live on. So we live in a world that's regulated by timeless principles. And I'm going to talk about them because these timeless principles are astrological. And sometimes we don't understand them because they are astrological. One of those major principles, i.e. laws, we can call them laws, In other words, if you look at the 10 commandments and look at it from the Hebrew, actually the word commandment would be principles, the 10 principles. These are principles. You can use one of them or you can use all of them. They're still principles. They were actually based off 42 principles that were the part of what we would call the religion of the Egyptians. And religion in that means is not the religion we have today. It wasn't something that ruled them. It were principles, and those principles helped govern them. So you could embrace the principle or not embrace the principle. But the principle was there to serve you for your greater good. You understand that? In other words, if it says these food groups will serve you and your body will be strong and healthy, these food groups will not serve you as well and your body won't be as strong and healthy. You can make a choice. Now, is that a right or wrong choice? No, it's just a choice. See, this good against evil idea that we have been given is an idea that don't serve us. It's not serving us. It hasn't served us. But if we can understand these are decisions that I can make, and as I make these decisions and I don't know that that don't serve me, then it could hurt me or harm me. But if I know that, that's why above the door of the temple of Delphi, it was the inscription, man or woman, know yourself. I have to know what works for me. Because what will work for me may not work for you. It may work somewhat, but you, because you're built on a different sign or a different makeup, then you have to find out what works for you. Now, does that make sense or no? Is that complicated? I hope not. So, one of the major principles or laws is the law of reaping. And we call it the law of sowing and reaping. But I'm just giving it backwards. We call it the law of reaping or receiving what you sow. Because just because you talk about a law of sowing and reaping, all of us are reaping, we're receiving from the product of what we sown in the past, but don't know that what we sowed is now a part of what we're receiving. Do not. Okay. And that's just that, and that's complete across the board, period, no matter what. So, and that's Mark chapter 4, which we'll get into that a little bit later. I hope that we'll have time for that. In other words, what you're receiving, and all of us continue to receive on a daily, a weekly, or a yearly schedule, what you're receiving today is the results of a mixture of many things, not just one thing or one event. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean a farmer who plants his seed in his garden and it doesn't grow the crop that he desires to get. It may not be what he thinks that it is. It may not have been a bad seed. It may not have been his lack or his care of the garden. It could have been the soil that the seed was in the garden. Is that possible? Well, see, I grew up on a farm, and my grandfather told me, he said, cotton will grow on most any kind of soil, but corn won't. He knew that. My grandfather knew. He knew what soil. He didn't have to send the soil sample to Atlanta, to the Conservation Society, and find out what that soil, he knew that. That was his expertise, because that's what he did. You know, that he did that for a living. So he knew the soil. He knew what the soil would do, and he knew what to do with the soil. And so, you know, we have a tremendous amount of scripture about that, and people don't even realize that in this master book there's a lot of principles about the soil and how to rotate your crops on the soil and how to let your soil, let it lie fallow for a year. After 6 or 7 years of planting it, let the thing lay, and then and there's a lot of scripture about this, but we're ignorant to that, aren't we? We go out and we dig up the ground and we put some seed in there and we say, okay, I want okra, squash, tomatoes. You don't get okra, squash, and tomatoes. You may get vines or you may get plants. Why? Well, the old timers knew that if I didn't put my okra, my squash, and my tomatoes, depending on what I'm planting, is it growing above the ground or is it growing in the ground? Where is the moon in relation to that plant? So what difference does that have to make? I mean, here moon ain't got nothing to do with it. Is that right?
And different plants get planted at different times as well. You don't, just one phase of the moon doesn't go plant your.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. We're talking in the entire science just of planting. Well, if your life is the results of things that have been sown in it, some of the things you sowed, some of the things other people sowed, some of the things society sowed in your life, and yet we are continually receiving things, could we not ask ourselves the question, maybe I could be cautious of what's being sowed in my body? And that would make it clearer when I would take the aphorism, know myself. If I'm going to know myself, and part of that, this idea that's behind me of this year, 2018, is that we would begin to know ourselves. And to do that, then I need to know astrology. I need to know more about astrology. I need to come to grips with the fact that the Bible is an astrological book. And I can show you that in many places. It's hard to talk about God and not talk about astrology, because Elohim is astrology. The Hebrew Elohim, God's, G-O-D-S, is the wheel of astrology. It's all of the 12 powers that make up the one complete whole. And so those ideas are not common. I couldn't go to the First Baptist Church and say this, and I know that, and you know that, but I should be able to. It's the fault of all of us. If we're going to say whose fault is it, it's all of us, because we have accepted certain things, and rather than to ask questions or rather than to challenge some ideas. So it's a mixture of many things. And I don't have to labor on this, I don't think, but if you're in law enforcement, you know that on the full moon there's going to be a lot more crimes. Why? Because the vampires come out on the full moon. That's just a fact. Isn't that right, Marvin? Yep. If you're in law enforcement, you know that is a fact. Well, if you are in medicine or in healthcare or in hospital, you know full well that 3 days, the moon is full for 3 days. You know that during those 3 days, you're going to have more babies in 3 days than you will the other 26 days of the month. That's a fact. Why? And then we want to say that the moon has got not a bit of an effect on me? Wrong. I mean, you are 90, now they're saying 98% water or fluid, and you know full well how the moon affects the ocean. I think. I don't think there's anybody today that don't realize and recognize that the moon affects the tide. It's that magnetic current of the moon that affects the water. Well, if it affects that water, does it affect this water? And absolutely yes. Am I affected when the moon is waxing or waning? Yes. Yes, we are. And we will recognize that when we say criminals are more predominant when there's a full moon. Does that mean that I'm not, because I'm not a criminal? Or am I a criminal in disguise? You see what I'm saying? So we try to say it's affecting them, but it's not affecting me. That's not true. Every one of us are affected by these timeless principles, by these timeless laws. And especially this law of receiving or reaping. Because that's what my life is. My life right now is the results of the things that I have received or the things I have reaped. From what? From what I saw. From what I've put out there. So our whole ideology of time, whether it be daily, weekly, or yearly, is based on the movement of the earth with its relationship to the timeless universe. Astrology. And so I wanted to... astrology, I want to just put the word up. Astrology, and I spelled it a little bit different, but that's what I have to spell it. It's a star. Well, what is a star? A star is light Right? Period. I don't care if it's, you know, our sun is a star. Everybody buy that? Our sun is a star. And so what is it? Can we say it's light? Without it, would there be anything on the earth? Nada. Nothing. Nothing would grow. Nothing would happen. If we didn't have this star we call our sun. So our sun, which is a star, which is light, is the life of this planet. That should not be rocket science. That shouldn't be hard to grasp or hard to comprehend. That's what a star is. And then logi. What is logi? Logi is a Greek word that comes from this word, logos. Last week we talked about two principles, the logos and the Christos. It's almost talking about the two major things of the physical body. One of them is your immune system, and the other is your adrenal system. And if you don't have both of those working to their greatest potential or their greatest maximum ability, then you put yourself at risk of other things that could happen to you, no matter who you are. So you have to have both of those working. Those are those two things. And so last week we were working with the number 2, and I'm going to do this because I want us to work with this number 2 again, and we're going to divide. This is the idea of the universe, and I divided it in the middle. We can call this the equinox, even though I made it look like a wave, or like a, and it is a wave here because this is how time is measured off this wave. Okay? But this is also called the equinox, which actually means equal. So what is it saying? It's saying that this is day, and this down here is night. And I can take that to just infinitum. I can call that heaven, I can call that hell. I can call that spirit, I can call that matter. I can call that God, I can call that man. And I want to tell you something. If you think that we can do this, if we can just erase this part and say, well, this is all we need right here. Or if you think, well, we'll just take this part and this is all we need right here. You're wrong. God needs you as much as you need God, because one without the other is nothing. You mean God without me is nothing? Absolutely. I mean, you tell me what God is without you, and you can come up with a lot of religious garbage, but you can't come out with anything that's scientifically proven or proof. All of these are scientific proofs. And I think a real problem that we have is that I'm including myself in Christianity here, we have allowed our theologians hundreds, even thousands of years ago to move science away like we didn't need it. And we do need it. We've always needed it. What is science? It's the proof of truth. That's all it is. Don't we want truth to be proved? I would. I personally would like to see truth proved out. I would like to see. Prove, what does that mean? It's testing it. It would be just like if I took an engine and I built an engine, I put an engine together. I want to prove that engine. I want to test that engine. I want to see what that engine will do. Well, now, I'm not like a lot of people that I put that thing together, and I don't care if it has a big cam in it and it's got lifters and everything else in it to make it more powerful, to make it go faster, etc. When I take it out there on the highway, I'm not just going to barely ease it down the road at 500, 600 RPMs. Maybe I ain't going to get it above 1,000 RPMs. No, that's not me. I put the thing together. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hammer that thing down. I'm going to twist it as tight as I can get it. If I can twist that thing to 6 or 7 or 8,000 RPMs before I move into another gear, I want to get it there to see what it's going to do. I'm not going to ease it around. Now, people buy these brand new cars and they just ease the thing around. I said, that's the wrong thing to do. It's under warranty. Stick it. Put the metal to the pedal. I mean, dear God, go out there and make it go. That's under warranty. They should prove their work, shouldn't they? I argued with Ford 3 years ago. I had a customer who had bought a brand new 2007 Ford truck with a 5.4 engine in it. It had 72,000 miles, and the thing got to where it rattled and wouldn't hardly run. 72,000 miles. I said, this truck should only be partially broke in. I called the Ford place. I said, isn't this truck under warranty? Well, it's past, this was 3 years ago. And so I said, yeah, I know it's past the time, but it don't have but this many miles on it. 72,000 miles. Something should be done. Y'all should do something for this guy. They would. And so I put a new chains and a bunch of other things. We did $3,200 worth of work on this guy's truck, his engine. And I told him, I said, if I was you, I would be knocking on Ford's door. I would be writing letters. I would be doing everything I could. I'd be putting articles in the newspaper. And he's a farmer. He's an old timer there in Cahata. He's probably 82-year-old, and still he's a cattle farmer. And so, the long story short, because I just kept on him and kept on him and kept on him, and I knew Bobby Brooker at Brooker Ford. Bobby and I went to school together, and I kept harassing Bobby. I said, Bobby, me and you both know that ain't right. Me and you both know that Ford had a bad stretch of engines from 2004 to 2007. That's just a flat-out fact. Ford should make that good. Well, Bobby stayed on, and you know what? They finally, after about a year and a half, they finally sent him a check in the mail and give him a refund, a rebate on the money he spent on that engine. He's happy. He's got a good truck. But see, you don't take away from one of these to try to establish the other. You're trying to take away God and put God somewhere way off out. I read books that I don't agree with, but I read them because they have a lot of information of things I do agree with. So I'm not going to just not read something because it's taboo or I might not like that. Many times if I'm doing research or I'm studying, I want to see other ideas. So I'm reading from people that I don't agree with on some things, but do agree with on other things. And I'm not saying they're wrong and I'm right. They could be right and I can be wrong. But if my mind is not open to look outside this so-called box, I may not see some things that would serve me phenomenally. So these two concepts, day and night, heaven and hell, God and the earth, all of these concepts and these ideas, this is where in Hebrew we have this first glip that we have, which we call the Aleph, which is number one, and it's the glip that's the symbol for God. It's not God. And so when you see words like Elohim, that's the first glip in that word. But that word Elohim is referring to this whole astrological wheel of 12 divisions. That's why the word Elohim is God's with an S. That word God is used, Elohim, 32 times in Genesis chapter 1. So in Genesis chapter 1, it's all about the God's S. In other words, the whole astrological wheel. So it's about the whole shebang. And I won't say more about that. It's a lot more. I just get off on another rabbit trail. I don't need to do that right now. And the second glip in the Hebrew alphabet is this glip, and this is called the Beth, and this is number 2. And this is real simple in its complexity. Okay? If you can follow that line. It's simple, but maybe complex. From this thing I call timeless. Many of the ancient philosophies, Hindu, Buddhist philosophy, they call it no-thingness. No/thingness. And the reason they call it that is because it's everythingness. But when you try to name one thingness and say that's it, to the exclusion of all the other thingnesses, then you miss it. You miss the point. So they call it no/thingness. And I add a phrase to that. That is actually everything. So Paul says it this way. God is all. That's inclusive. So what would that mean? God's everything. See, brain what do you mean God is everything? Well, if you and I, if we would entertain that idea, it's hard to entertain that idea. If you would entertain the idea that God is everything, it's not anything. You mean God is the bad stuff too? Hey, look at Isaiah 43. God said, I created the good and I created the evil. Well, in most people's ideology in the West, in America, evil's the same thing as bad, ain't it? That's what we've been taught. That's what we've been taught. But God is everything. So you take this principle of Aleph, the number 1, and here's what you do. You divide it into 2. And here's what it does. It gives you this concept right here of plus and minus. I can say it like this. I can say male or female. And of course the female says, but I don't want to be the minus. Well, you're really not. You're the plus. You are the crown of glory. There's no question about that. I don't think that any of the plus males would think that they're the crown of glory, but I guarantee you they would most all say the female is. So it's not a matter of taking from one to add to the other. It's just the simple fact that it takes the male and the female, the plus and the minus, to manifest this principle of 1.
That, the Aleph up there looks actually like the sine wave,
It
goes
is.
sideways.
It is. It's exactly what it is. It is the sine wave sideways. That's a tongue twister, isn't it?
Yes.
It is the sine wave sideways. So, a starology, astrology, logy, logos. What do we get from logos? Do you know what we get from logos?
Word.
We get word. That's exactly right. We get word. W-O-R-D. And so then what do we do with the logos and the word? Were we not in Christianity to call that a person? And did we not identify that with one individual in history and time? Did we?
Yes.
Does that mean you're not the logos? See, that's the problem. You can't associate yourself to be the logos and are the word. If the word is God and God is the word, do you have a word? You're fooled to think you don't. You have a word. Well, I mean, I have words emanating out of me. Does that mean that they don't count? See, that is to destroy the logos. And so when you see this starology logo, then this is the concept of words that describe or explain stars, light, sun, life. So we should embrace astrology. Now, can it be used as a pseudoscience, or can it be used in the wrong fashion? Yes, it is. It's just like, there's certain terminologies that I see society using these terminologies in a very negative way. For instance, Illuminati. Most people think of Illuminati as a force of evil people, evil men who are trying to manipulate and control the world. That's probably true, but the word Illuminati actually is an ancient word that meant the ones who were enlightened ones, the Illuminati ones who are enlightened. I am an Illuminati, but I'm not associated with some organization of corrupt people who want to destroy the earth for just a few of them. See, they've taken precious words, and now the people are afraid of the word Illuminati. I'll give you another one. The Cabal. The Cabal is also a group of men or women or people, political people, who want to control and manipulate the whole world. But it's a Hebrew word that means to be an antenna and or a receiver from God. I'm not going to give up the word Cabal from ancient Hebrew, knowing that I'm an antenna and I receive from God. What am I receiving? I'm receiving light. I'm receiving life. And guess what? I'm receiving a word. Now what I do with that word, is I build my life, and I don't know that I do. Every one of us. You've been doing it. You've been doing it since you learned word. Since you learned to use this logos, this principle of word. Because why? Because it is the principle of receiving from the seed you sowed. You mean words are seeds? Well, you know that they are. If you don't know they are, then I'll tell you, yes, they are. Words are seeds. So astrology, with that suffix of logos, it's used in so many different words. Theology, the suffix is just attached to a whole plethora, hundreds and hundreds of words. But just to give you a few: theology, sociology, triology, genealogy, and the list can just go on and on and on and on. So you can add them all that you want. But it comes from the astrology, just comes from this idea of the Greek concept of light, and the production of light as word, as it does produce the words or words. I want to read you a statement on this little book. This is a little book about how to read the faces of people and try to associate these faces with signs. So, it may not be anything, but he makes a statement here that I think is really, really phenomenal. He says, the universe is working beautifully, turning the lights that are seen into facsimiles of substance and form. All conscious living beings are driven by the patterns of light that were occurring at their moment of birth. Now, to me, that sentence is worth a lot, and most people don't give it the time of day. So I'm going to read it to you again. The universe is working beautifully, turning the lights that are seen into facsimiles of substance and form. All conscious living beings are driven by the patterns of light that were occurring at their moment of birth. This inherited view to the source drives each individual to replicate the qualities of this guiding light in all of his or her creations. Each of us sees this source as a different shade or color. But when we all shine our lights in unison, it is bright enough for all to see the total spectrum of creativity. And you can look in here this morning and see that all of your lights, our lights, shine differently. But when you compile them and you put them together, you have the spectrum of the rainbow. You have the beauty of the color spectrum. As you learn to see the making of all of creation, you may come to understand, like everyone else, you are a unique rendition of the many colors that emerge from the one source of light. Anyway, I thought that was a tremendous statement right there. Many sources of light. Okay, if you have a Bible and you want to turn to me, we're going to actually look at something in the Bible. We'll read something to you. I think it's one of the most profound parables in all of Scripture. And most folks do think the same thing, but Mark chapter 4, if you would turn over there with me, I want you to look at that with me. Mark chapter 4. Verse 2, let's do a little bit of reading here from the Scripture. Mark chapter 4, and you can find this particular parable in the Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You find it in those three Gospels. You won't find it in the Gospel of John. You won't find it there. But in Mark 4, verse 2, Mark 4, verse 2, it says this, and he taught them many things by parables. Actually, didache, that's the word for parable. It actually means instructions. That's basically what we do here with the board, or what we do with different things, is we just give out instructions and you can do what you like with them. And that's what that word means right here in this particular place, that he taught them many things. He taught them many things by parables and said unto them in his doctrine. The word doctrine is the word for instructions. Doctrine is not what religion has made out of it. Parable is a story. Many times it's drawn from natural different substances. That's what a parables draws from natural substances or supernatural or stars to tell its story. But the doctrine, the word doctrine, the King James word doctrine is didache, and actually it means instructions. It would be better today if we were looking at that, doctrines as instructions instead of what they've made them out to be. So here's what he said, verse 3. Hearken, behold, there went out a sower to sow. And it came to pass, as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and the fowls of the air came and they devoured it up. Some fell on stony ground, where it had not much earth, and immediately it sprang up because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no fruit. Others fell on good ground, and it did yield fruit, sprang up, and increased, and they brought forth some 30, some 60, or some even 100-fold. And he said unto them, He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Usually when Jesus says that, or when that's in a story, you've got to think again. He's not referring to physical ears, is he? So it's not literal, is it? So he's not talking about something literal, because everybody's got ears, don't they? But everybody can't hear the understanding of a story. So then what do you have to do? You have to understand this is something spiritual. It's not just literal, because literally everybody's got ears. Literally everybody can't hear. So we have to find another meaning other than the one that we have been told. So come down to verse 14. Here's the explanation to this particular mystery, is what Jesus calls it, the mystery of the kingdom. The sower soweth the word. Now see, as we read the parable, we were relating that to seeds in the ground. But now, let me ask you a question. Is not every person on the face of this earth that's able to speak or say words sowing seeds?
Yep.
That's what this is about. It's not about corn crops. So what is he saying? He's saying, well, some of your words manifest 30% of the time. Well, thank God for that. Have you ever said something, oh, I hope that don't manifest? If you start paying attention to what you say, if you really, really begin to pay attention to what you say, and a lot of the things that you say, you want to drop back. I didn't really mean to say that. Have you ever done that? Yeah, oh, yeah. I mean, have you ever got in a place, a tight spot? You ever got in a tight spot and you said back out of defense? I know y'all did. I did. I've done that a lot. And then after I said it, oh God, I wish I hadn't said that. You did. You said it. You know what you could have done? At that moment I said, oh Lord, let that be crop failure. Let's say those are them 30%. Let's hope them, let them be choked out with the thorns. Dude, choke them words out, God. Don't let them things come to pass.
Unfortunately, those are the ones that usually come out the others.
And you know, it's not just the word that has something to do with the production of the fruit. It's the place it's sowed. So, what am I saying? There is a whole plethora of things that's involved in the sowing of your word, or the speaking of your word that produces your life.
Well, you can sit there and say that angry, ridiculous word aimed back at somebody, and how its effect is how their soil, their ground, is going to take it.
Exactly.
If they are a person that's willing to be, okay, I forgive you, then...
So that's what I'm talking about when I say there's an entire plethora of things that occur here. That's why I said what I said in the beginning. If I were to go and dig out here in this soil right there, it looks like grass is growing right there. Now, well, it grow grass, it's going to grow tomatoes and squash. I promise you that will not grow tomatoes and squash. You know how I know? I know enough that when I was on the farm with my grandfather to know that all of the topsoil has been taken off of that, because when I started building this building 30 years ago nearly, this whole hill we took a dozer and we shaved this whole hill off so there wasn't anything here but slate, chert. It was just red, slate, and chert. And I promise you, you won't grow squash and tomatoes in slate and chert. Why? The soil won't produce. Well, can your heart or my heart or your ground or my ground have had things shaved off of it so that I'm just chert or not rich soil? It could be in areas. Do you understand? It's a little bit more complicated than just saying, I'm going to plow that up and plant a seed and I'm going to get something. That's not necessarily true. You hear what I'm saying? And so we fail to understand all of these principles that are involved in what he's giving here. He's giving some tremendous principles that have depth, that have tremendous understanding to these principles. And so we have words many times that we have been told they are one thing, when in truth they're not. For instance, I'm going to use this right here, and I've been talking about the taking up your cross, because does it have anything to do with it? I want to show you my cross. Well, I have to do the whole thing just about it to get my cross, because you can look at your cross. This is my cross, and I'm going to do my cross in this one right here. This is the cardinal cross, and in the cardinal cross, I want you to just watch this. This is the cardinal cross, and why is it called the cardinal cross? It's because these are the four major points that exist. The four major points. That we got that word Yod He Vav He. Then we put vowel points in it and made a word out of it. Now that word we got Jehovah. But actually that word that's introduced in Genesis chapter 2 verse 4, the Lord, L-O-R-D, Yod He Vav He. Actually what it was referring to was earth, air, fire, and water. So if you really want to know what is the real Lord, L-O-R-D, earth, air, fire, and water. And if you constantly reduce that down and you begin to realize, you know who earth, air, fire, and water is? It's me. It's me. Because without the compilation, the mixture in certain ingredients, just like the soil has to have a mixture of certain ingredients to produce something, the mixture of these certain ingredients in me is earth, air, fire, and water. And you know what? When I was born, like for instance, I was born right here on February the 19th. And I would like for every one of you in your mind to get when you were born. Let's see, I'm just going to put December the... Rachel, you're the 6th?
I'm the 3rd.
You're the 3rd?
Sarah's the 6th.
Huh?
Sarah's the 6th.
Sarah's the 6th. Okay, I knew one of y'all was one of the other. That's good. The 3rd. Okay. These are approximate dates because this is August the 21st. Okay. And so I'm going on this cuff, the 19th, and that also this is when I was born. And most of us never look to the parallel or the equinox or the other side of where my date is. And my other side would be around August the 21st. So that would make me have both Leo and Virgo attributes. It would have me have both Aquarius and Pisces attributes. And then when I begin to see my cross on this side of the scale, because I've come pretty close to the cuff over here on, let's see, March the 21st, April, May the 21st. And this is confusing because they don't start in the beginning. So May the 21st, this is Gemini. And so my cross would fit right along in here between Gemini and Taurus. But Rachel, I've got Rachel up here because Rachel would be right here on December the 3rd. She would be parallel to June the 6th. And then she would also be parallel to Pisces and Virgo. So that would be her cross and my cross. So, and yours do yours the same way. So that you, and when you start to see this, you understand this, you'll begin to realize, here's what I'm made up of. So here is my power, here's my strength, here's my weakness. Because see, you have powers and strengths. And you can't know your power until you know your weakness. So that when I'm weak, then I can be strong. How can I do that? If by knowing myself, by knowing who I am, by knowing what I've got, by knowing what God did to me.
So would your weakness be what August the 21st is, or is that something you're strong too?
No, I may have weaknesses here and strengths here, and I may have weaknesses here and strengths here, because I have to do a study of the whole picture, not just a part of it, because there will be strengths and weaknesses. I will have ascending signs, and I will have a descending sign. There'll be planets, there'll be stars, there'll be different things in my... That's what he was saying right here in this book when he said that the sun... I mean, I think that's just the most profound statement. He says right here, the universe is working beautifully, turning the lights that are seen into facsimils of substance and form. All consciousness living beings are driven by the patterns of light that were occurring at their moment of birth. On my moment of birth, because this is an astrological cross, at my moment of birth, this was all occurring at the same time. Not just at different times. This was all occurring. And so that made me be who I am. It helped me to be the pattern of the person that I am. Just like you. Just like wherever you fit. Whatever your pattern is at this time. Okay, let me read this real quickly from Alvin Boyd Kuhn and try to just unhook or see if you got comments or questions about this. Part of it, because I said, God, again, God, and if I said God, with an exclamation point, God, and then I said, what is it? Is it wrong? I remember years ago when I started thinking of God as an it, I thought, oh Lord, I ain't really gone off the deep end now, calling God an it. Well, yeah, because somebody called it Mother God. Well, is it mother, or is it father, or is it both?
It is.
It is. And there it is. So if you want to know what it, capital I-T, make you feel better, capital I is, it is. So whatever is, it is. Period. So when I made that statement in my mind, and that's what I was talking about this, when I say God, exclamation point, God, what is it? I would like to that rattle within the core of our being so that I can realize it is all. It is everything. And so what does that make me? That makes me what it is. Not by my doing. Nothing I have done or nothing I didn't do. It's what it did. It's what it is doing to me. And I know that's offensive to the Christian mind and the Christian ear to call God an it, but it is. Wow. So, these principles we were talking about, these are eternal principles. Word, logos, is a principle. This is an eternal principle. And it works. Yes, it works some 30% of the time. Because why? There are a lot of different things involved in trying to say, well, if it is a law, it is a law that's made up of a multitude of principles working together collectively. Some of those principles are negative. Some of them are positive. They must be that way. But what we have to come to a grip of is owning all of it. That means I have to own all of me. I have to recognize all of me, not just a part of me. I'm not just You know, any of us can toot our horn and blow our smoke and all that, but we have other aspects of our being, and we have to own them. So, it is the law, this is Alvin Lloyd Kuhn, it is the law that binds the whole register of manifest life to the throne of God, and each link in the chain to the ones below, here you go, going back to night, the ones below, and the ones above. So you don't have the below without the above. You don't have the above without the below. You don't have the day without the night. You don't have the night without the day. You don't have God without man. You don't have man without God. That should not be hard for us. That should be okay. I can chew on that. I'll smoke it just a little bit, see how it works out. It is the law of nature that has remained entirely esoteric in religion and utterly unknown to science. It is the key to the entire evolutionary enigma, the answer to the great unsolved mind/body problem in psychology and biology, the kernel of all religion. And what is this crucial law? It is the modus by which the living energies on one plane of life are related to those on the planes above it and below it. As Greek philosophy expressed it, the energetic essence of any one plane or kingdom served as body to that of the plane above it, but as soul to that on the plane below it. And he goes on, he said, well, what is this law? And listen to this. I think it's beautiful. It is the incubation of the Spirit, i.e. God. The incubation of the Spirit, i.e. God, in the womb of matter. This then is the law of nature. Wow. If we could grasp that, could God, the Spirit, be incubating in me and through me? And through that incubation period of time, because it's different. I mean, you know, you can incubate a chick. We used that word last week in Genesis chapter 1, which is not used often. It's not used at all. And it says this, and the earth was without form and void, which is not what it means. It's filled with growth and potential. That's what it means. It became growth and potential. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved. That word moved in Hebrew is actually a word that means brooded. That's exactly what a hen does to those eggs when she's incubating those chicks. She's growing them things. That's exactly what happened to you in the womb of your mother. That's exactly what is happening to you and me right now as we're moving and living and going through life. God's incubating in me, working in me. This is an eternal law. This is the law of the Logos right here. The law of the Word. That law of the Word is the law of my life. And I come to realize that it's my words, it's the things that I do that help to build the structure of who I am. They're the results of my life. So again, am I saying every word you say is going to come to pass? I'm not saying that at all. Just like Jesus said, every seed you sow ain't going to grow some. So if we become masters of our own life, not everybody else's life. I think that people try to master too many people's lives. If you just got to work on yours, you got enough work to do on your own, right? If you'll look in the mirror and say, I think I got my work cut out for me. You know, if we would all just do that on a personal level, and then we could fulfill probably a part of what Paul said that is true. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. In other words, salvation means wholeness and completeness. So I could become a whole, complete being by working on me. Taking into consideration all of these phenomenal truths. So anyway, with that, we'll just kind of disconnect and unhook. I had a bunch of other things to read, but for another day, another time, okay? All right, any questions? Everything clear?
That you just said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. What there's that word?
The word fear The word fear is a mistranslation. Actually, it's the word respect. It should have been translated respect. Work out your own salvation with respect and trembling. Cautiousness.
I said, that makes more sense.
Bad use of words there, fear.
Yes.
God's not the author of fear. God's not trying to work something through you by scaring you with fear. Yeah. Okay.